Welcome to the next episode of the Creating Belonging podcast. Today, my guest is Lauren Glazin, and I want Lauren just to introduce herself. So, Lauren, tell us about you.
Yes. Hi, Justin. I'm Lauren. I am a British person living in New York, and I'm Jewish, and I'm gay, and I'm fun, and I'm blonde, by the way. Important identity that gets overlooked, I think.
Wait, hold on, pause. Are you a real blonde?
That does, these questions I'll answer at a later date. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter for the content of this podcast. I'm blonde, identifying.
It is a part of your identity. Lauren and I worked together several years ago, and maybe just to get us started as a fun way to warm up. In the book, and I think even in the first episode of our podcast, I told my favorite story about belonging was when I brought my team together in Chicago for a dinner, and then we went to a concert, and Lauren was at said dinner. And so I'm the only one who's been telling the story from all the way along because it's been a big part of this work. Lauren, what was your experience with that dinner?
Yeah, I've got behind the scenes information for everyone about this dinner. I remember it exactly how you told it. I was a participant, and I know that you and I spoke about the dinner recently, actually. And I said to you, I'm the person that keeps kosher in the story, and I've been kosher 17 years. And all 17 years, I've gone to so many dinners and events and things. Always, it's so ingrained in me now. Like, I'll have the other option. I'll have the modified option. That's fine. Not everyone needs to accommodate every single dietary request. But for you, even I think I knew you for at least 2 years before that dinner. Every time you would ask questions about it, you'd always want to know, what does this mean? Why can you not mix milk and meat? Do you have to do this or do that? So I think you're just a generally curious person, but the dinner definitely evolved into us all feeling like we belong, basically, exactly sort of like you labeled it. And also it's a different feeling, right? You're going to your boss's house. You were the director of the group, so we were invited into your space, into your house, and we were all side messaging about it. What's it going to be like? And it was really awesome. I think even to this day, and sorry if anyone listening that I've been on a team with since then, that was one of the best teams, one of the best environments, one of the most authentic I have ever been. And I still speak to everyone on that team. And events like you inviting us into your house, it's just another level of feeling a team dynamic. The food was delicious.
Thank you. I know that we had salmon, right? With pasta and tomato sauce. That was the main.
And a salad, I remember.
Yep.
Yep.
And then I think we did have cheese, like a cheese entree to start, but it was like, I knew that your rule was like 30 minutes between everything, right? So
yeah, I mean, typically it's 30 minutes between dairy and meat. So fish was okay.
Yes.
And I definitely remember that. We all sat down, and I don't think there was like meat by the, like, a typical charcuterie board.
No, there was not.
Has pork and salami and things like that. There was none of that there. So I didn't even have to, bypass the meat on the cheese plate. But I remember, we all sat on your sofas, and you had a great, I don't think you still live there, but you had like an amazing view of the water. We were like up high, and we all like sat and hung out and drunk wine. And I'm a massive lightweight, so I was probably wasted by the end of the cheese course. Like one glass of wine and I'm on the floor. So that hasn't changed, by the way, Justin. I'm still a lightweight.
I love bringing someone into the space of creating belonging who was a part of that story. So thank you for sharing. And the curiosity thing, I honestly think I have learned the most about the Jewish religion from you than anyone else. So I want to thank you for that.
You should label me Rabbi Lauren, on this, because that's, I really like, I think your curiosity, and it's really fun to teach people about it. It's definitely a big part of my identity, and maybe we'll get into that more, as our time goes on together. It's a massive part of my identity, and it's so fulfilling to talk to people that are genuinely curious about it. So thank you
Yeah.
for giving me that opportunity.
Thanks. Well, let's get into it then. So, looking at the creating belonging model and the different areas of the creating belonging model, as you reflect on different experiences that you've had, different communities that you've been in, either work or with the church or anything. So, any experiences that you've had that you can think of that come to light of when you've sat in one particular quadrant?
Yeah, such an interesting question. And as I was preparing for this podcast, really thinking about it. And I think I've sat in every quadrant in all of them, and I've sat in some more than the others, and in different aspects of my life. Like in a corporate environment, I've been in corporate companies for 10, 11 years. And I've also been heavily involved in creating Jewish experiences, and like, different sort of Jewish organizations in my personal life. And
Mhm.
so each of those buckets brings me into different quadrants. And I would say largely about being a gay woman.
Mhm.
And I would say, so when you and I worked together, I think I was a recluse in this model. Not physically, I was out a lot, but in the belonging model here, I was definitely withdrawn from the gay community. And I think I was overbearing potentially in the Jewish community, because those were, and they still are, two of my strongest identities, along with being British and blonde. And so I was not out. I was in the closet when we
Mhm.
first started working together. Although I think I told you personally very early on that I was
Yeah,
not entirely straight,
I
but
remember it.
you do?
I remember it. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was probably one of my first trips to New York after
Mm.
you had started working on the team.
Yep.
And we went out to the Stonewall Inn,
Mm.
and you were like, "Oh, by the way." Totally remember it.
Yep, yep. And that was massive for me. I mean, I think we sort of played it off, and it was what it was, but that was a crazy thing for me to do. No one at home knew. My parents didn't know. 99% of our colleagues didn't know. And
Mhm.
and then there I am, like telling my boss. And I've done a lot of work on opening up and being able to be more vulnerable. Those are things I've struggled with a lot just in my personal life. But
Mhm.
that was now what, like 8 years ago, like 7, 8 years ago. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I definitely remember that. So when you and I worked together, I was definitely more of a recluse. I wasn't in the community, at least not out. I
Hmm.
was secretly in the community, and obviously having a great time. But it's a completely different feeling when you are out in the community and out loud and proud, which
Yeah.
I'm so fortunate to be now. But yeah, I wasn't then. And so that it swings with your identities, right? It's making me question, like, if you're in one part of this model, where are your other identities? Because they don't all sit in the same quadrant at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, you're making me think a little bit about this because I like a lot of the way that I describe it is like we if we look at one distinct community. So for us, it would have been the company that we worked in at that point in time. And
Mhm.
so in that one community, we can be in one of the quadrants and we can shift around in those quadrants. What's interesting is when I met you in 2015, I think you were very, and I wouldn't call you overbearing, but very out with you were authentically Jewish. Like that was a large part of your identity, and you want people to know that. And I really appreciate and respect that. And then you were also minimizing and hiding another
Mhm.
part of your identity. And so it's interesting because it makes me wonder when we have an identity that we can be out and proud about, which was your religion, but another identity that we're hiding and masking, where does that put us? It's interesting. So, and you're just saying that you felt like you were actually in recluse.
Yeah, definitely with my gay identity for sure. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it really is interesting, because for me, being Jewish, being and loud about being Jewish is low stakes. And I don't know if that translates or makes sense, but being gay was much more emotional, much more deeply in some shame and some other things going on inside me. And so it was definitely easier to be that. And that's some of the personal work that I talk about. So there's a lot of psychology, I think, that goes into this model as well, and how we talk about our identities and how we are able to be authentic and belong. It's a lot to do with us and the environment. There's lots of factors.
Yeah. Yeah. Thinking about it was really at that point, because you were hiding that one part of your identity, it's really hard for you to be in a place of belonging because you're masking, hiding part of it. So it's an interesting one because you're kind of floating in the around the minimizing, overbearing, recluse, floating in there, but definitely not in belonging because your different identities are in different places. I'm also curious, given some of the narrative around anti-Semitism and the rise of anti-Semitism, when you say being out as a Jewish person, I'm curious how that, obviously you live in New York right now, so that's very different than being Jewish in Missouri, I would assume. But I'm curious your experience or thoughts around that.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. It's a really important conversation at the moment. And let me give you some background. So I grew up in London, and being Jewish in Europe is not something that you're out and proud about. It's really, anti-Semitism has always been high in Europe for obvious reasons, right? World War II and just some other things very close to Israel, which is a topic that has lots of nuances as well. And in America, Jewish identity has always been, this is my personal opinion, how I feel about it. Jewish identity in America, especially, again, I'm in a bubble in New York, I think, and it's almost seen as overly accepted, a privilege to be Jewish. And I cannot tell you the difference of mindset that it is to be Jewish in Europe. So I go to synagogue on the holidays. There's no signage anywhere. There's armed guards around every synagogue. This is the last 34 years that I've been going. There's iron gates. Every single synagogue has massive iron gates. There is, again, no signage. There's police everywhere. And that's for our safety and security in Europe, being Jewish. And then I moved to America 10 years ago. I remember my first 3 months in America, I went to an event by Jewish Federation. I was living in Pittsburgh at the time. Great place. Shout out to Pittsburgh. And with the Jewish Federation of Pittsburgh, I got taken to a conference in Dallas. So we're in Texas, we're in Dallas. I'm on a coach with all these other Jewish people. We're going to this conference, and we pull up, and I look out the window, and on the front of the building, massive, I mean, like 70-foot letters, welcome the Jewish Federation of Pittsburgh. We're so happy to have you. In massive letters, it said Jewish. And I'm walking into a building, no security anywhere, no nothing. And we're telling everyone that Jews are inside this building. And I turned to my friend and I said, how are we going in there? It was literally unheard of for me to be able to go into a building that promotes being Jewish in America and feel safe. And it was the best night ever. Of course, it was completely safe. It was just very, very different. Some of the nuances, even in my identities of being British and Jewish and living both places and having identities whirling around everywhere there.
I didn't realize. So even in London, that was your experience.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you know me, I'm obnoxious, I'm loud, I'm annoying, especially earlier Lauren and younger Lauren. And I would wear massive Star of Davids. I had Israel stickers on my car, and my parents would be like, Lauren, just be careful. You can't park your car in London with these. We're a little worried here. And I'm like, I don't care. And now I'm like, I get it. I really get it. So yeah, even in London, definitely it was scary. And so how it feels to me is like America's catching up with the first 24 years of my life, how I had to be being Jewish.
Wait,
yeah.
but catching up like in a
like
tell
a
me
bad,
what okay.
Yeah.
I'm like in a aggressive way.
Right. In a regressive way where Jews are feeling unsafe, where the attacks are on the rise by, I don't remember the percentage, by hundreds of percentage, and people are just becoming more disengaged.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I know that you're very involved within your synagogue and kind of across the country in different organizations. So I'm curious how you see others shifting, how they show up in the world.
You mean Jewishly?
Yeah, yeah, Jewishly. Is
Yeah.
that a word? Jewishly?
Yeah, it is now.
I love it.
I see people shifting a lot, and I see people scared. I also think generationally it's different. Millennials, boomers, Gen Z, there's lots of studies done, and in 50 years from now, what's it going to look like?
Mm-hmm.
And I see people showing up in ways where they are still being Jewish, but in sort of a less loud way. So we will meet up for holidays, but in someone's house or like in a synagogue, and even synagogues, Brooklyn, where I live, there's not that many younger people going to synagogue anymore. And we're still really proud. We're still, I would say, culturally very Jewish, but religiously that dial is being turned down in my experience. And like you said, I've been involved in lots of different Jewish organizations, one of which is it's called Moishi House. And
Mm-hmm.
I know, well, I was
Yeah.
very involved when you and I worked together. And Moishi House creates Jewish experiences for people where they're at, really sort of wants to promote whatever it means for you to be Jewish. That's what you should do. So I would put on different types of events, some Jewish, some not Jewish, but we would all be there, we'd be hanging out, and that would feel Jewish in some ways, but there was oftentimes not much religious affiliation there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that us Jews do pretty well. We love community is the biggest part of being Jewish. Mm-hmm. Socializing, food, drinking. I was explaining what being Jewish meant to some of my friends the other day, and I'm like, basically we get really drunk, we eat a lot of food. There's one holiday in particular, it's called Purim, and you are commanded to get drunk and to be in a different frame of mind than you are when you're sober, so you can access different thoughts and you can connect in different ways. So we lean hard into those parts of Judaism in my world and what I can see. We just make it fun.
Your description of your experience I've always been, maybe I can get into this. Maybe I should, because I don't know, can I become Jewish?
Absolutely, you can.
Okay.
We don't go recruit people.
Right.
Different to some other religions, but we totally accept it. We could do with a few more Jews. So come on over.
The way that you describe your experience, I've always appreciated it. And it's different to what I assumed or expected. But I think one of the things that I love, aside from the partying aspect that you've described, one of the things that I love is just the idea of community and the strength of bringing people together. And like Shabbat on Friday, just shutting everything down and enjoying time with loved ones. That I love that. I think that's incredible. And I think we don't need to be Jewish, but I think we need to embrace that principle of tuning to the ones that mean the most to us, not tuning to our phones. I want to hear, so you talked about biggest parts of your identity being Jewish, being gay, and being blonde. I'm curious, I'm assuming there's a lot of variations of Judaism, right? Just as there is a lot of variations of and interpretations of Christianity. So I'm curious, in your experience, as you came out with your sexual identity, how that worked in with your religion, and even in particular, thinking about the creating belonging model, what experience did you go through in the quadrants within your own synagogue?
Yeah, it's a great question. And also just one point on Shabbat. Thank you for bringing that up. It is the best 25 hours of the week for sure. And it's funny, I was actually reading something about it just quickly, and it said, it was like a conversation between two people, and someone said, how on earth am I going to be able to not be on my phone, not be on my computer, not be on my Kindle, not be, because for the Sabbath, for Shabbat, we turn all electricity off. And I think it was a rabbi that answered, and he said, this is the time that we need it the most. The more technology we have in our lives, the more we should be disconnecting from it just for a period of time. And I couldn't agree more. I know I go to the sauna a lot. Actually, this is not in my Jewish identity. And I always try and leave my phone outside the sauna, because I'm forcing myself for these 30 minutes to be without my phone. And even the 30 minutes, I'm like rushing back to my phone, like we all are. And so for 25 hours, it seems like so many hours. And it is so necessary, so necessary in this day and age, especially with mental health. And, so it all, I think we were onto something 2000 years ago when we came up with this rule.
Yeah. So I literally this morning, I just finished the book Stolen Focus, written by a fellow Londoner, Lauren. It is fascinating how technology, and not even just technology, but just our way of life, is destroying our focus, our ability to focus. And so that idea of being able to unplug for a bit and reset is so important. So go turn off your technology after you're done listening to this podcast.
Yep.
Turn off your technology.
Listen all the way through before you turn off your phone. Yeah, to answer your question from before, how was my Jewish identity, my gay identity, and the intertwine when coming out? It was really tough. I grew up in an Orthodox synagogue in the UK. So the UK doesn't have tons of different strains of Judaism like we have in America. And it was sort of, you're either Orthodox or you're Reform. And we were Orthodox. Men and women sat separately in synagogue. It was only a man was allowed to be a rabbi. It was very, very sort of those sort of gender rules. And I knew something felt a little off to me. This doesn't feel like something I really connect with. And honestly, it was only until I started spending time in America that I understood that you could be Jewish in many different ways. And it was beautiful to connect with conservative Judaism, more Reform Judaism. And those strains of Judaism, not only do they embrace the gay community, there is tons of communities of gay rabbis, of trans rabbis, of people, non-binary people who are very involved in those strains of Judaism. It's not only accepted, but it's celebrated. Not everywhere in Judaism. That, and in my later years, in the last sort of 10 years, that's been so healing for me. It wasn't a massive repression being Jewish and being gay. There was other nuances for me. In particular, I have a gay brother, and that really, I thought there could only be one gay sibling in each family. And now we know that 30% of gay people have a gay sibling. So there was other things that went into it, but certainly it was very tough coming out in an Orthodox Jewish community. So much so that I only really came out publicly when I moved to America, when I physically removed myself from that environment, is when within 4 weeks of moving to America, I was exploring my sexuality. And that's been very interesting to unpack in therapy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that living the American gay experience and growing up in rural Iowa, I can identify that in that home environment, it's not something you explore, you push it down, you hide it. And it's not until, I think for many, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I think for many in America, the gay experience is, if you're in that kind of repressive environment or conservative environment, you remove yourself from it and go find a new place where you can almost be anonymous to explore like what that is and what that means for you. It's interesting that you found this kind of freedom. Good Lord, this is like so American. This freedom coming to the States in, number one, being able to express your religion, but also being able to I come to terms and find your sexual identity.
Yeah. And the two are very intertwined. Like, I only look at Judaism and being gay in a positive light intertwined
Mm-hmm.
together. I don't look at it in any sort of negative way at this point in my life. And I think I think being accepted by the Jewish community helped me accept myself. And again, not only accepted, like celebrated, like pushed to talk about it. I remember studying with a rabbi where we specifically studied gay subtones of the Torah and sort of like different sexual experiences that are talked about in the Torah that could have like a queer meaning. Like that's the stuff that I do. Those two of my identities are intertwined. It's like so intertwined and so celebrated. So I only
Yeah.
have positive views of being Jewish and gay in the same sort of breath.
That's incredible. It's incredible because I have a very different relationship with many religions just because
Mm.
I find their exclusion of primarily sexual identity, but secondarily their exclusion of so many other things. Religion in the US being used to oppress groups of people, and not just in the US, across the globe, religion being used to oppress. And I don't think that that's, when you go read the words, that's not what it's supposed to be about, right?
Yep.
So that's where I've always had bristle. And as an adult, because what's interesting when you talk about you didn't realize there were multiple ways to be Jewish until moving to the States. I actually, growing up, and I don't talk a lot about my spiritual upbringing, but my family raised me as Lutheran. And I really respect the way that my mother approached my spiritual upbringing because, in the Lutheran religion, you're considered an adult once you are confirmed and go through confirmation. And so that was her, like, you will get through confirmation. And then from there, you are, by the Lutheran religion, spiritually an adult. So then you go figure out where you go from there. And what I respect the most about that is that it gave me a foundation that I could work from. Thankfully, my natural curiosity also pulls me in different directions. So before I was confirmed at a younger age, my babysitter went to a Baptist church. And so I would attend the Baptist church with them. And at a very young age, remember accepting Jesus as my personal savior and being born again. So I concurrently attended a Baptist church and a Lutheran church and could, while they're both Christian religions, differentiate what was going on between the two. And I think that's what led to then, once I was 18 and left home, what led to some of my spiritual liberation was understanding some of the hypocrisy that happens within all of that. And for me, there was a rejection of, my church was emailing me trying to fundraise as a freshman in college. And I'm like, so I don't attend your church anymore and I don't have any money. So sorry, no. And started to see it as like this fundraising thing. Anyway, there's my tangent on my religious and spiritual upbringing. But that's why
Yeah.
today, like, I consider myself spiritual
Mhm.
on my own terms, like in my own ways, but I don't ascribe to any particular scripture.
Yeah. And that's it. I've had conversations. It was just Passover, in not to make this again about me and Judaism, but it was just Passover last week, and I hosted a Seder, a Passover Seder, which is a dinner where you talk about the story of Jews, the Exodus from Egypt, and we had some non-Jewish folks around our table, and they were sort of blown away by, there was a prayer that I found thanking non-Jewish people for sitting around our Passover table, because there's so many people that would not come and attend a Jewish event. They just wouldn't. And they couldn't believe it. They were like, thank you for thanking us. Like, what? The Christian religions would ever, do that. So it was really interesting. And we were having a conversation about being gay. We were all gay at the table, and being gay and being Christian, being gay and being Jewish, and your sentiment, what you just said, and how you grapple with it, but the spirituality side of it helped grow your identity, is pretty much exactly what our friends were saying at the table. So I hear that when I talk about being Jewish and being gay, I hear your side of it a lot from the Christian standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that comes up for me, so when you're talking about Passover, is that we also, Easter was this past weekend, Christian religion, Passover, and there's other holidays, other religious holidays around this time. And I saw someone post on Facebook Sunday, Monday, something like that.
Mm.
And it was however you celebrate, this is a time of rebirth and renewal. Oh, wow. That's where when I tap into spirituality, there's actually, you look across all of the religions, and interestingly enough, there are holidays and the types of holidays that align around the calendar. So whether you call it Christian or Jewish or any other religion, there's something energy wise, spirituality wise that's happening for us collectively.
I think as humans, we need it. We need something bigger than ourselves to look to. We need like a higher power, the universe, whatever you might call it. It's so essential to be able to look out just outside of our own brains and our own worlds
Mm-hmm.
and have something tied to spiritually. I think I will always I will always appreciate that in myself and in other people is that spiritual side of it. It's so I think it's so grounding and so helpful to
Mm-hmm.
be okay, not everyone cares about what you're saying. Like we are a chain of bigger events and things happening outside of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, bringing it back to creating belonging and the creating belonging model is when we can shift to that perspective,
Mm-hmm.
that like lifting up to more of that when it comes to religion, in how religion can impact someone's belonging,
Mm-hmm.
going back to the core of love, going back to the core of including people and community, and that whatever it is, we all may have some higher being that we're looking to, and getting out of those repressive components of what people in pulpits are telling us.
Right, right. And that's thinking for yourselves, ourselves, being individuals and doing, I was saying this to you before, but doing the work individually on ourselves. Like we got to understand ourselves before we're able to anchor our
Mm-hmm.
identities in other things. It's like I've seen people anchor their identities in the wrong things because they were looking outside of themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
so doing along with doing the inner work, you'll find your identities, you'll find things that are lying beneath the surface
Mm-hmm.
that you really can you do anchor yourselves in, even if we're not labeling them as identities, values, and what's your purpose. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
you led us through a workshop like understanding our own individual purpose, and it still sticks with me. I still use it 3 companies on, so I think even that as an identity is important.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think the one thing that I want to pull out of that, and to kind of put the punctuation point on the conversation, is that idea of self-awareness and doing the internal work. Because for me, that is the, if well, two things that I want creating belonging to do. I
Mhm.
want it to, number one, get us to dig into ourselves and understand more about ourselves, dig into self-awareness. I think Carl Jung said every advance of humankind only happened through self-awareness. And
Right.
so if we can dig into our self-awareness, and then secondly, embrace and accept others and choose love over anything else.
Wait, I have a
So I think,
question. I have a question for you on that.
yeah, yeah.
Why do you think it's so hard for people to accept other people? If I'm just out here living my life and someone really disagrees, like why is it so hard for them to just accept that?
Yeah. Well, so I think if we look biologically, we are wired.
Mhm.
So in our need to be a part of a community, in our need to be a part of a tribe, we also sort for likeness.
Mm.
And so this is where I talk a lot about the prehistoric parts of our brain that get in the way of modern life,
Ah,
because 2000 years ago, when we were living in tribes, when we were living in tribes, absolutely, we needed to quickly understand who was in and who was out for our own safety, for our own survival.
mm.
But today, the threats are not the same, but we still have the same prehistoric brain. And it's that prehistoric brain that is saying they're different from us.
Right.
So we need to push them away. They're a threat. And that's where I think we have to do a lot of work to override the prehistoric parts of our brain to understand, no, that's not a threat anymore. That individual is not a threat anymore. That whatever it is isn't actually a threat. But it's hard because it's a part of our brain that also keeps us alive every day, right? It does also get us to jump out of the way of danger. That's why I think we push people away. And it's like you said, when we're not digging into self-awareness and we're only paying attention to what's outside.
Yeah.
It's very easy then to quickly sort likeness versus not likeness and then just push those that are not like us away.
That makes so much sense. Because I find myself doing it as well. I think that's where we go into overbearing. I think overbearing is one that is one of the quadrants in the model that we might not be able to see in the moment as much as other people can see it in us.
Yes.
So I think that's a really interesting one. I think that's the quadrant where the self, if we're living in that quadrant, or I guess I'll talk for myself, when I was living in that quadrant, that's when I needed to do a lot of inner work. Being overbearing is like always terrible, but there's probably things knocking at the door that we're not answering.
Yes, the thing with overbearing is that we may not realize it when we're there, but it is very likely that we're doing others harm while we're there.
Yeah. Yep.
It's actually why, so early on in the creation of Creating Belonging and building this work, I created an assessment because I wanted people to have a tool that they could use to quickly identify, through a series of questions, where do I sit on the model? And I found that it was doing the work disservice because we are really good at overestimating ourselves.
Yeah.
What's the stat I used recently that actually, I think Al said it on an earlier episode, 93% of the population thinks that they're above average drivers, right?
I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we overestimate ourselves. And so we're like, oh, I'm in belonging. Everything's great. Like, I'm really accepting of others. But there's so many blind spots that we have and we don't realize it. And so what I found, I burned the assessment because I didn't ever want it to do a disservice of the work of it allowing people to not go into deep reflection.
Right. You don't want to like force people into a box just because they have to, if that's different for them. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. So I think we can be overbearing. So we do need to, again, go into self-reflection and also ask others. I love how all this is coming back together because Al talked about the idea of internal self-awareness and external self-awareness. So what we know about ourselves and then what we learn from other people and how other people see us and how we show up in the world. And so we need both of those things to balance.
Right. I listened to that episode with Alan. It was incredible. It was really eye-opening. And it made me think about social signals. When someone's talking to me about a topic I literally could not care less about, you can tell in my face. And I need to change. That's a social signal for me that I need to tweak. I think we have a lot of those. We don't realize our social signaling all the time. I've probably been sat here on this video, not smiling and like looking disinterested to my natural face. That's also social signaling, internal, external. I know.
You're making me think how much I'm conscious of that. And it's so weird in this new environment because I'm literally staring at a camera and I'm so used to staring at a camera and smiling and giving these signals that I'm interested because that's what I'm trying to portray over cameras. We're on all of these Zoom calls and I'm constantly communicating over Zoom. But anyway, Lauren, this is incredible. We're just going to do the whole conversation because it was an amazing conversation. And I hope you all stuck around with us and found it as engaging as I've found it engaging. Lauren and I could probably continue talking, and we probably will. I want to thank you all for joining us in this episode of the Creating Belonging podcast. Lauren, I always want to make sure that I'm giving my guests an opportunity to shout out anything that they want to shout out, self-promotion, whatever it is. So here's your opportunity. What would you like to share or invite people to connect with you?
Wow. That's the hardest question you've asked me. Just like follow me because I like ego boosts, So I'm Lauren Glsen on Instagram and LinkedIn, connect with me, ask me any other questions that you have. And I love this model, Justin, and I appreciate you so much for inviting me and giving me a space to talk about some of this stuff.
Yeah, thank you for joining me, Lauren. Thank you so much. And we'll see you all again on another version of the Creating Belonging podcast. Thanks.
Thank you.